Friday, April 25, 1986, 1 p.m. In Pripyat, Ukrainian SSR, life is routine and peaceful. The city is home to thousands of employees of the Vladimir Ilyich Lenin Nuclear Power Plant, whose 4 RBMK, high-power channel-type reactor, units symbolized Soviet technical triumph. But deep within Reactor No. 4, the crew begins a routine shutdown for maintenance. As part of this process, they are required to perform a critical safety test to determine if the power from the still spinning turbines can supply the cooling system until the backup diesel generators kick in 23 hours before the disaster. Unnecessary delay. At 2 p.m., reactor operators begin reducing power. According to the plan, the test should have started immediately. However, in Kyiv, the local power grid reports a need for electricity. The test, critical for safety analysis, was delayed for 9 hours, leaving Reactor No. 4 running at a dangerously low power level. This delay is the first fatal error. With reduced power, a fission byproduct, xenon-135, builds up in the core, acting as a neutron poison and reducing the core's reactivity. 20 hours before the disaster, the reactor is poisoned. After the delay, at 11:10 p.m., control of the reactor is handed over to the night shift, supervised by Anatoly Dyatlov. The crew, operating under pressure to complete the test before the scheduled maintenance, now faced a poisoned core. The power level had dropped to a critically low point, below which the reactor was considered extremely unstable. Dyatlov's insistence on proceeding with the test, despite the obvious instability, was an act of commanding arrogance. Chronology of command error. 3 hours before the disaster, disabling protection, 1 a.m. Around 1 a.m. on April 26th, even though the reactor power was stabilized below the safety threshold, supervisors ordered the test to continue. To raise the power to a level sufficient for the test, operators began removing almost all control rods from the core, a direct violation of safety regulations. This error was amplified by another fatal decision: to avoid an unexpected automatic shutdown, SCRAM. During the test, they also disabled the Automatic Emergency Shutdown system. With this, Reactor No. 4 was switched from a safe mode to a state of extreme instability, without the capability for automatic response. 20 minutes before the disaster, critically low level, 1:03 a.m., the reactor's power was stabilized at just 200 megawatts kW, far below the planned 700 megawatts for the test, and well below the level at which the reactor was considered stable. Operators attempted to increase the flow of cooling water, which induced more instability. 4 minutes before the disaster, final adjustments, 1:19 a.m. Emergency signals regarding the low water level in the steam separation drums appeared in the core, but personnel responded by quickly pumping in more water. The goal of initiating the test became the sole priority, ignoring all warning signs coming from the reactor itself. 54 seconds before the disaster, test commencement, 1:23:04 a.m. At 1:23:04 a.m., operators officially began the safety test. They deliberately shut down the steam turbines. With this, the flow of cooling water to the reactor began to decrease. As the water heated, it turned into steam. Due to the RBMK reactor's design, with a positive void coefficient, steam absorbs fewer neutrons than water. This caused an uncontrolled exponential surge in power. The moment of cataclysm, 1:23:40 a.m., AZ5, the death button. When operators realized that the reactor power was surging uncontrollably, they pressed the emergency shutdown button, AZ5, SCRAM. This button was supposed to instantly drop all boron control rods into the core to halt the nuclear reaction. But due to a fatal design flaw in the RBMK reactor, the tips of the control rods were made of graphite. In the first seconds of insertion, the graphite displaced the coolant, water, which caused an instantaneous surge in core reactivity, rather than reducing it. Essentially, the system's only fail-safe mechanism became its deadly trigger, 1:23:58 a.m. The explosion at 1:23:58 a.m., just 54 seconds after the test began, the uncontrolled power surge led to the first massive steam explosion. The explosion ripped the 1,000-ton steel cap off the top of the reactor and hurled a massive plume of radioactive material and graphite chunks high into the night sky. A second, more powerful explosion, likely caused by atmospheric hydrogen, destroyed the entire core, exposing it to the atmosphere. The hour after the cataclysm, the initial reaction and denial. Following the explosion, the entire plant remained in darkness, filled with dust and smoke. Despite the entire 1,000-ton reactor roof being blown off and graphite pieces lying on the roof, the nuclear engineer in charge of the test insisted that the reactor was still intact. This authoritative denial of reality was the first and most catastrophic move following the incident. The first response? Firefighters. The initial on-site response was heroic and instinctive, activating the fire brigade. Firefighters without any protective clothing and unaware that they were fighting a fire on an exposed nuclear core immediately went to work. Their primary goal was to extinguish the fire in the turbine hall and on the roof of the adjacent reactor number 3 to prevent spreading. Many of these firefighters, exposed to lethal doses of radiation, died in the following weeks. Their bravery, while saving other parts of the plant, was a fatally misinformed mission. Dyatlov and the refusal of reality. Anatoly Dyatlov, who supervised the shift, began showing symptoms of acute radiation syndrome, vomiting and weakness. Nevertheless, when one of the reactor supervisors returned to the control room and said the reactor was destroyed, Dyatlov refused to believe him. His first priority was not evacuation or alarming authorities, but procedurally gathering the operating logs from the control room before leaving to report to the plant director. This commitment to protocol against the obvious physical horror sealed the fate of many. The hour of radiation. 1 hour after the explosion, the operational team still hadn't fully grasped the situation. Although the initial fire suppression response was technically correct, shutting down turbines, fighting the fire, it was executed with a complete lack of awareness regarding the radiation levels. Outside, the wind began carrying the invisible radioactive cloud toward the city of Pripyat. In this critical hour, the best possible response would have been the immediate evacuation of Pripyat and surrounding areas and the acknowledgement that the core was open. Instead, Soviet authorities maintained their denial. Conclusion: the triumph of protocol over physics. The Chernobyl disaster was a fateful blend of design flaw, the graphite tips on the control rods, and the positive void coefficient, and human error, command arrogance, and violation of safety rules. The 24-hour chronology is not a story of a sudden incident, but of a slow, deliberate escalation. Every decision, from the delay of the test to the disabling of the emergency shutdown systems to the pressing of the AZ5 button, which was designed to save but ended up activating the catastrophe, increased the chances of the unimaginable. The consequence of this initial denial and delay was immense. The residents of Pripyat were not evacuated until 36 hours after the explosion, exposed to lethal doses of radiation. Chernobyl is not just a story of a nuclear accident, but of a systemic tragedy where protocol and hubris ultimately triumphed over science and safety. The tragedy of Chernobyl is not just a story about technology, it's a story about the devastating power of denial and the cost of every lost second. If you found this rigorous timeline and analysis valuable, please make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to 24 Hours Critical. We commit to exposing the critical moments that define history, one decisive hour at a time.